Hi everybody, here's the video that I referred to when I did the stars for May 2011. I said I was going to put a video up which explained a little bit more about how I see the potential influence of the outer planets Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. And this is going to be in two parts actually, and this is part one. So just to recap some of what I said when I did the May stars, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, astrologically speaking, are known as transpersonal planets in that they trigger generational cycles which tend to make history and affect us to varying degrees globally. Now in 2011, Uranus and Pluto, along with some Saturn, will be impacting us very strongly, which means that the bigger wheels, or so-called circumstances beyond our control, will have a bearing to, as I say, a greater or lesser degree, depending on how they impact our natal chart. And of course, when that happens, when one of these slow-moving, transiting planets impacts our natal charts, then it's kind of less indirect and more in our faces. In general, Uranus has since March been zeroing in on Pluto, and as mentioned in the forecast I did for the whole of 2011 for each of the signs, when these two get together, they tend to produce sometimes sudden events worldwide. Not all at once, but, in places across the world, which can set us back on our heels, which can be maybe quite dramatic, and get us to start reassessing our lives, our lifestyles, our lifestyle choices, or just the way things are run. And their job is to do that, and it's their job in all of our lives to tear down an existing order, sometimes in quite graphic ways. In fact, when Uranus, in the very minutes that Uranus was moving into Aries on March the 11th, depending on the time zone, but March the 11th, that's of course when the earthquake happened in Japan. Uranus has been in the quieter backwaters of Pisces for about 7 years. But in those minutes from March the 11th, it moved into Aries, and it will be in this much more fiery, lively, energetic vibe of Aries for the next 7 years. So there's going to be pluses and minuses to do with that. So yes, Uranus is definitely about tearing down an existing order, but so is Pluto. But Pluto tends to do it more from the inside. Pluto is a little bit sneakier in the way that it does it. Now, again, I'll say, this always depends on how these transiting planets are currently impacting our natal charts. But globally, if we talk about it, in those sort of general terms, this combination can be, at times, in certain places, explosive, very powerful, and ultimately revitalizing and regenerating. Uranus is about sudden change, and Pluto is about evolutionary change, and those can manifest as external factors, or the, as I said, the bigger wheels sort of forcing us to take stock because there's upheaval around. And in the current aspect of Pluto and Uranus, there is likely to be, again at times, to varying degrees, turbulence, stress, tensions, just a feeling of unrest really kind of bubbling up to the surface in certain people, places, at certain times. That, plus the current conjunction of the North Node with the galactic center, does mean, that this is a moment of perhaps a great evolutionary kind of leap forwards, but it comes in sort of little hops, really, as kind of the penny drops. In 2011, these two will be closest to each other from June until December, And in the preceding period where we are now, this aspect, as I say, has been getting into gear since March, so it's a lot closer at the moment. Now, over May, June, and some of July, Saturn will also be throwing her weight into this mix and slowing, because that's what Saturn does. It kind of sometimes puts grit in the engine. You know, it kind of grit, kind of sludge. And that means it will slow the evolutionary action of Pluto, and the sudden, rather shocking at times events which produce reactions to change and bring on change through our reactions to those events through the Uranian vibration. So with Saturn here, it'll kind of draw things out, slow things down, and really, in a lot of cases, force us to realize that we can't paper over the cracks this time. Now, Saturn is the planet of boundaries and structures, physical, mental, emotional, so that's external structures, but it's internal structures. Saturn tends to put up resistance. That's her job. She's the form maker, and slow down the process of change. When Pluto and Saturn are in aspect to each other, then a force is put into operation which challenges boundaries, limitations, and, you know, inward things like inhibitions and fears that maybe we have within ourselves, or who have been set within us, scripted within us, by whoever, you know, authority figures of the past, guardians, the status quo, the way the systems run, just past conditioning, you know, whatever it is. But that will have set us apart from our own will, or maybe potential, or and power to choose. So however it is for you, Pluto will trigger a cycle of destructuring these historical constructs and help us, ultimately, you know, help us to break free of restricting self-definitions which may have kept us safe, and perhaps asleep, because, you know, not all structures are bad. You know, they're there to keep us safe. But maybe, you know, they've outlived their usefulness. Maybe that's a scripting, or maybe that's a system that is no longer relevant, you know, in the present time. So, you know, whichever area it is, we increasingly find is becoming claustrophobic or counterproductive or just not relevant. And so we begin to reach, you know, slowly, as Saturn always does tend to make things go slowly for something better. It's a little bit like the chick in the egg, you know, so used to this familiar little world, but begins to feel, as it grows, this tightness, you know, this is getting a bit cramped in here. I wonder what's up there. I'll just tap on it a bit and just see, because, I don't know, maybe there's something better. Sort of, it's kind of a little bit like that. So in many cases, what has spelt security, familiarity, tradition, normality for us will be challenged in certain places, in certain ways, at certain times during these transits. Now, Pluto will root out deeply ingrained patterns. As I say, Pluto is sneakier and more subtle in its evolutionary effects than Uranus, which can be very much a kind of a, you know, something which really does make us feel ambushed. So Pluto's job, I call it the sniffer dog, actually, is to root out anything in our systems and authoritarian societies or setups that is maybe the cause of underlying discontent, or matters that have been kept hidden, even, or swept under the carpet, or toxic. And because of the plutonic kind of pulse that's coming out, particularly triggered by the Uranian energy as well, which is very volatile, and this underlying discontent can do no other than to start bubbling up to the surface across the world. Some places more than others. Some are more overtly and quickly, some, more slowly. But in the old hierarchical patterns of Saturn, structures which have housed certain individuals or ways of running things or groups, corporations maybe, who abuse their power or who are manipulative with it or who haven't listened to the people or it's just outmoded, maybe like dictators or large companies or corporations which have such huge influence, in fact, that they can even, kind of exert pressure to change government policy. They're going to dig in their heels, even when they are called on their actions by the people. And the power of Pluto and Uranus, planets of change, have a Saturn, planet of tradition and limitation, and a kind of a pincer movement at the moment. And that means that her stability, Saturn's stability, protection, boundaries, because that's her program, that's what she runs, her limits, will be severely challenged by the action of these two transformational and evolutionary forces in the current aspect. Bad news for the outlived systems and structures, and good news for the clearing necessary to abolish, or in fact, not all structures are bad, as I say, so maybe not abolish, maybe to build in a different way upon existing foundations. So for you personally, it could mean that you've got to face some insecurities, testing circumstances for the time that Saturn is aspecting important points in your natal chart. Maybe certain setups which have served you very well, maybe meant security and normality for you. You can put food on the table, won't be there anymore. Or they won't be there in the form or in the routine that you're used to. External changes of circumstances around you could create a crisis, minor, major, for you to deal with. And of course, it's all about response. Really, the planets are, we're not just powerless puppets upon which the planets kind of exert pressure and buffet us around. Really, it's weather. It's simply a kind of a long-range weather forecast that astrologers give when they're talking about, transiting planetary energies. It's kind of giving advance warning of maybe heavy weather coming in, and it's all about how we respond, depending on what kind of weather it is. I mean, if it's something as simple as a rainstorm, well, you wouldn't go out without an umbrella, would you? So it's a kind of a response to the weather, but this isn't such visual weather. It's subtler weather. It's vibrational storms. It's waves which move invisibly. Rays, beams, frequencies which move invisibly, but they do have effects, as many of you will realize now. So it's Saturn's job, as I was saying, to build walls to keep us safe. Traditionally, the castles, the boundary walls. That's all Saturnian. That's to keep us safe. That's to keep what we possess within safe boundaries, or our homes safe, our families safe, and in the wider terms, social hierarchies. And it's Pluto's job to periodically tear them down and Uranus' job to shake them up. So in the current aspect, this is very likely to be happening. So for a while, a lot of balls are going to be in the air before kind of coming down and landing in their new positions and maybe being nudged around a little bit. The challenges, therefore, are going to help you to see how you like to do that going forwards. It's going to help us become maybe more aware of what limitations have been holding us back, how our fears have been holding us back, and maybe those fears have been carried all our lives and have held us away from our real and true and powerful selves with the right to choose that which makes us feel good, that which seems correct, it seems the way for it to be. So if you've had a long-term habit or routine of being in a good enough situation in your personal professional life, which doesn't make you feel particularly happy, and you don't feel that it's particularly going anywhere, or that it's very sort of got you tied down in a kind of an uncomfortable sort of a way, then during these transits you're going to get the the chance to recontour your identity, redesign, redefine. I think that's the word. Yeah, redefine your life as you meet adversity, roll with it, and prove to yourself that you have the ability to handle it, and ultimately come out the other end more creative, more happy with the way things are, more successful in your life, and you're being more authentic. You're feeling as though you're being more authentic. You're more up to speed with yourself. You're more true to yourself. And of course, as I've said before, this depends on how these planets are relating as they go through their transit with your natal chart. And as I said, the timing of the impact of this, these forces, and your response to that weather, that vibration, those vibrational winds and storms, will depend upon, your basic character, and your basic natal chart. So the sign Pluto's in at the moment is Capricorn. Now, as I say, Capricorn relates to hierarchies and the establishment across the world, but also it relates to the Earth herself, Mother Nature, in fact. It relates to Earth's ancient history. Much will be uncovered, I think, and the bones, the very bones, as it were, beneath our feet, will begin to speak out their old secrets, their ancient secrets. The archives in the rocks themselves will begin to tell stories in the ice at the poles. They begin to tell stories about our origins and about previous cycles and how that impacted our globe as well. And also Earth's rocky outer skeleton, well, that's due to rock and roll, along with her climate in 2011 and 2012 during these Uranus-Pluto transits over that time. So it's kind of spring cleaning time. It's shaking out the rugs time for Mother Earth herself. And you know what? We might just find that lost key down the back of the sofa. So there's a lot of good things about this as well, but in the moment it might seem, a little bit challenging and look a little bit difficult. Anyway, that's the end of side 1, and if you're interested, I'll catch up with you on side 2.